Good morning and welcome. For those who don't know, my name's Doug Reeder. I'm the executive chairman and one of the co-founders here at Sterling Seacrest Pritchard. For those who don't know as well, we are one of the largest privately held independent insurance agencies in the southeastern U.S. We work in partnership with our clients and community to provide services, solutions, and support customized to today's dynamic marketplace. Our firm has a client-first philosophy and robust resource platform delivered by almost 300 colleagues across, I think it's now 7 offices in the Southeast. One of our key differentiators historically has been deep industry verticals with dedicated teams, including healthcare, construction, which is the origin of today's program, real estate and hospitality, transportation, logistics, nonprofits, and private client risks. We also have a large benefits consulting practice, which is industry agnostic and works across all sorts of businesses. We're also broker owned with a common long-term perspective and a commitment to educating and informing our clients and friends, which is manifested in today's program. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I'm very excited to have this program. The origin of it is that I attended an AGC National Risk Management Conference back in January. I attended this program, which was presented by Travelers, and I felt like it was super compelling. I mean, by the end of the program, I'd emailed the PDF to half a dozen clients, and everybody agreed. And so it was with great excitement that I reached out to our local team to see if we could get this presented for our clients. It's a really neat illustration of being thoughtful about how you onboard work and how you should, be mindful of the risks that are onboarding with that work and how that changes over time. And we're certainly in very uncharted economic waters. We've got supply chain problems. We've got inflation. There's all kinds of risks that we have not historically had to deal with for quite a while. So I think that the timeliness of this material is very good, and it presents a model that you can take back to your company. Travelers is graciously sharing this, and it's really straightforward and fairly simple, but it's also, you can see as they go through it, how it would be adaptable to your individual businesses so that you could change the risk rankings yourself depending on the unique risk factors that you encounter in your business. It was so compelling at the program. Actually had 2 large national contractors that you would know by name come and give testimonials as to how effective it was, and the fact that it changed their businesses. In one case, one of the contractors said, "We shrunk our pre-con team, not because we wanted to, cut bodies, but just simply because the model allowed us to be more focused on the jobs that fit us better and to avoid, opportunities where we knew we were either ill-matched with the type of work or the location or the owner or whatever." It allowed them to, really focus and laser focus, and to the point where their efficiency of onboarding work that was better suited to them became so much higher, they just didn't need as many people. So it was really compelling. We have today to present the program Brian Nichols. He is the Managing Director of Construction Financial Services here in Atlanta, which means, translating, he runs the surety book for Travelers and the surety team for Travelers based in Atlanta. And if you don't follow these things, Travelers is either the #1 or #2 writer of surety consistently. And the thing that we really like about our partnership with them is Travelers really drills down into their data and to their clients and talk to their clients, and they come up with things like this, and they are willing to share it and push it out because it's just something that helps people run their business better. And they're not proprietary about keeping it just to Travelers clients, and so we really appreciate that. They do a great job, and Brian has got a really deep bench here in Atlanta, and one of his colleagues, Katie Vincent, is going to also join in some of the presentation. She's going to be remote. We're all here in our Atlanta office, but Brian joined Travelers back in 2008. and he worked in the Tampa office where he actually grew up in Florida. In 2017, he was elevated and promoted to the leadership position here in Atlanta, and so he's been here since then. And Katie has been with the company since 2018. Previously, she had worked with owners in the owner's rep business with BDR Partners here in Atlanta. She's got both a BSM in management and a master's in accounting. They're both very sharp, and we're very excited to have them here to present this material. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate it. So, Doug, if I miss anything that we covered down in Florida, please remind me, and I'll make sure to do that. So, full transparency, we started this concept during 2020, excuse me, when COVID hit. We, originally in the beginning stages of COVID thought jobs might be shut down, backlogs are going to shrink, and now what are we going to do? Thankfully, this concept still applies to what we're experiencing now, which is a continued strong, robust market, increasing backlogs, but not without challenges. So I kind of set up this concept of risk creep, and I've again adjusted this for what we're seeing in today's world. We still have a positive lending environment. Banks are doing well, better than they were obviously in 2008 in the last recession. We have a federal infrastructure package. I know we're talking to folks across all different market segments of construction. So there continue to still be a lot of either hard bidding opportunities, private opportunities, just a lot of opportunity in the marketplace. This sometimes can lead to overextension of risk. You add on to that what we're seeing with labor and continue to see with labor and supply chain issues, and then that can end up taking on some risk taking. What's your bid strategy? How are you handling inflation and contracts and things like that? We kind of sum all that up to this concept of risk creep. And it's not something that you wake up as you're running your firm and you see it at one morning. It happens over time. So you think about your watch, and you can watch that second hand or the minute hand, go around. If you just stare at it, it doesn't seem like it's moving, but over the course of 4 hours, it's going to move around quite a bit. Or for those of us that have kids, your kids don't wind up being 5 and then next minute they're 21. It kind of happens slowly over time, and you go back and look at pictures and you're like, my goodness, they've really grown. The SEAL team understands that. They move very slowly. They're here in these ghillie suits, and as they kind of creep up on an enemy, they're not doing it real full speed. They're doing it slow, so you don't see the change in the environment happening. And that's the same thing that could happen with your backlog or your portfolio of work. Little by little, job by job, the risk that you're taking on, you might just think it's one project here, one project there. It can slowly add up to a point where your entire backlog is made up of new risk. So have a bit of an illustration here to try to explain this a little bit. The risk-based price, which is the line in green, hopefully it's green for those of you virtually, that's the price needed to earn an acceptable return on a risk. So as the risk increases from left to right, you obviously need to increase pricing to deal with that risk. The white line is the market price. So this is what the market does to generate acceptable returns. Think of that red line there is kind of where you want to be or not be. So you really don't want a backlog of work to the right of this line. It doesn't mean it's not impossible to make money on the right side of the line. Just means you don't want your portfolio over there. As far as we can tell, the construction industry prices risk in very much the same way, especially during a downturn, which may or may not be coming, which is, I'm sure, a whole nother discussion that Sterling's going to have for you guys. The slope of the market price line may steepen a bit during peak times, but it also can come down when things get a little more lean and less work. So now let's picture a project, just to the left of that line, that red line, and think through what happens in a competitive marketplace. There are 3 big moves. As the bid lists get longer, supply exceeds demand, that will put the downward pressure on pricing. The market price line will move down. You can see all of a sudden that red line has shifted, and this project now is to the right of the risk. Now consider what happens when owners see this level of increased competition. They're going to shift more and more risk to the contractor. So all of a sudden, that project that was beginning to the left of the line is becoming way more risky. And you can see that the market continues to lower their pricing on it. And then we all see contractors that choose to take on more risk by trying new things. We're going to go to a new place. We've never been a federal contractor. We're going to go try to do some federal contracting, take on riskier work. and that project continues to move further and further to the right of that line. All these things happen together. It's not just one thing. They slowly happen and create this one project being more risky. But what happens? You're not bidding one project at a time. All of a sudden, you're bidding a lot of projects. So all those jobs that started where they were, on the left side of the line is now on the right side of that red line. And we really saw this happen in the heavy space. If you read ENR, ABC, AGC, any of those headlines, you've heard, of all these heavy contractors, these large heavy contractors on these large infrastructure projects, taking huge losses. You see CEOs coming out and saying, we're no longer going to do those jobs. We've seen CEOs be fired for the return that these risks are doing. So while I mentioned that space, we also see it in the general contracting space, right? I mean, have you ever built, a hospital? You've always been a K through 12 bidder, but you're going to go do that because you want to try something new, or maybe you hired a PM that's there. So, I don't think anybody running a company wakes up and decides to do this, take on more risk. It just happens as the market shifts and things change. So the way to deal with this is what we attempted to tackle, and that's to kind of come up with this concept or pretty basic idea of tracking those changes over time and tracking the risk that a construction company is taking on. So, as we think about project risk, there are certain characteristics that seem to repeat themselves, over time. And we actually do a study every year of our surety losses, and 60% of the time, we have a loss on one bad job. So it's not, a portfolio going down, it's one bad job, which is why our concept focuses in on not only tracking one job, each individual job, but then kind of adding it up to the portfolio. So think about it. These are new things on each project. So, if you just put one point, some sort of risk point for each new that you count in a job, that's kind of what we're thinking of. And these to us are kind of the biggest news that we see out there. We know that news add risk. There's a difference in a new thing and diversifying. We always have customers come to us and go, we're diversifying. We're going to go into the industrial space. Well, you have no experience there. That's not maybe diversification. That's trying something new. It's not bad. We just need to make sure we're acknowledging that and pricing it accordingly. So think about it here, a new job size. We know job sizes are growing because of inflation, but are we truly just having that happen, or is this truly a huge new job? New geographies. You're based in Atlanta, and all of a sudden you're going to go to Cleveland, Ohio, and try to work. New owners. Is this somebody you've ever worked for before? What do you know about that owner? Because again, our one bad job typically also has one bad owner when we have our losses. Is it a new type of product, new delivery? Is it, again, a hospital, something like that? Is it a new procurement method? Have you ever done a P3? Have you ever done design build? Those kind of things. And then what are you expecting to return on that risk? Again, if we think back to that slide, you should be taking a risk-based approach, but we know the market doesn't always allow for that. So let's see kind of how you can score it. We're going to walk through 3 projects here and kind of, hopefully show an illustration here. So project number 1, it's normal work. It is a new customer though, so you got 1 new there, and it is in a new geographic market. So that's 2 news. We're not too far from the bullseye. If we have any shooters online or anything, we're pretty close. Project B though, normal work for a great customer and a new geographic market. So sounds to me like we only have 1 new. We're real close to the bullseye there. Now project 3, we're taking on a bigger job than normal. And it's also our first P3 project. It's in Miami. Though they've always wanted to try working down there, they've never done it. And they are really excited to try bridge work. This sounds like a fabulous project of a number 4. So, that's kind of a simple way to look at each project. And I'm sure if you were to go to, one of your shareholders at your company and talk through each of these jobs, they'd be like, you're crazy. But what we typically see happen is, projects A and B. So we've added 2 new jobs to a backlog with some additional risk. So here's what we can do. Think about this almost like your work in progress schedule. So just for simple facts here, we have 5 jobs here, and we've assigned a risk point to each project. So project number 1 is is completed. It had no risk points. Project number 2, normal work, no new news there. Project number 3 is 1 new. Project number 4 is 1 new, and project number 5 has 2 new. So we've got kind of an average score there of 1.33. And if we kind of track that over time, we can be able to not only track our cost to complete, which us in the surety world do, and I'm sure you guys do in some form or fashion, but we can also track the risk in our backlog. So to the right-hand side is this kind of imaginary contractor, and kind of we can see over the course of a few quarters here in a few years, all of a sudden that backlog is slowly increased in risk. So what they had as an average risk score in 2015 of, we'll call it 2.5, is now up a whole point to 3.5. And again, that in and of itself is not a problem, but have you been able to price that as well? And that gets into, some go, no go that we can talk about. So, you can see in this 3-year period of time, they've really increased the risk in that backlog that they're taking on. Another thing worth pointing out, though, it's not just, maybe doing this risk point. You also have to maybe put in like a weighted average here to make the data more accurately. So instead of just taking into account the varying degrees of the importance of the contract price and significance, you got to kind of look. So a large contract may skew, the average here, and it may be, 2.5. Add some extra points there for different things. One important thing to note here is this has to be objective. It cannot be subjective. You have to purely acknowledge if there's a new on a project and if there's a risk there, because if not, we can kind of trick ourselves into thinking, well, they're not exactly a new owner. They're third cousins to a guy that we did work for at one point, or it's not exactly a new type of work. We've kind of looked at a building like that before and priced it out once. It has to be yes or no. There's no uncertainty in any of these things. So. Fortunately, we've had a very strong market the last few years, and it's allowed a number of our customers to kind of focus their pursuits on some things. So again, I told you we kind of came up with this concept a little dated. So 2020, backlogs coming into that year, we're very focused. We had been on and we have been on a very good run. And we kind of came into 22 going, is that going to continue? We see a lot of factors going on in the marketplace. So if you think about an archer shooting an arrow here, they like to stay close to that bullseye. And unfortunately, there's a chance as things continue to go well to people to kind of start shooting arrows a little bit outside of that bullseye. And we'd really prefer a backlog on the left as opposed to the right. So we think now is the time to be on high alert and get ahead of this. We're not trying to suggest that, you say no every time to something. It's just kind of being mindful of the fact that there's a lot of pursuits. Doug mentioned in that presentation, we had some large customers talk, and one of the things they really talked about was their go, no go process. And then even a lot of them, their risk review committee. And one of them in their go, no go, you have to identify every project team member that's going to be on the project. And they cannot be new either for a lot of those things. So you can't leave somebody out. If you leave somebody out, the project's a no. And when they introduced this concept, everybody's like, oh, great, we're putting a committee together to kill all these jobs. And what they found out is it really honed in what they were started to look at from a new business perspective, because they didn't want to take a project to the committee that's going to go down. They knew what they had to bring to them. And I can tell you firsthand, I had a customer growing really rapidly in 2014 and 15. 2016 came, they went in the year with a huge backlog, and we get the results. And, they just didn't perform well. And as we started talking about it, it was all, stuff they'd done. There weren't a lot of news there, except for new people. And what they found is when they hire new people, had great resumes, they'd go throw them on a job. They didn't have their DNA in them, and they would find out that just things didn't go well. And then they also, on a side note, were kind of they're trying to do everything better, faster, quicker, and kind of, running their people. So they scale back, and their go, no go. It's who's on the job and how long have they been with us? How much DNA do they have? I was with another client, actually just a week or two after this presentation, and they were telling us that they will not let anybody run a job that hasn't been with their company for over a year. So they can be on the job as in a junior role, but they cannot be the senior lead on a project because, even though, again, they have fabulous resumes, they may just not do it the way they do it. So.
I think the really cool thing about this is since they're numerical values,
Yeah.
I mean, you can sit here and say, okay, well, you know, do you have a solid sub team lined up? I mean, is there a label, you know, you can assign the weighting to where you've had issues in your business. It's, you know, this is what Travelers identified from their claims data, but that doesn't mean, you know, you can't tweak this thing and set it up to weight what's important to you in your business.
Yeah. That's a whole weighted piece of it where you've kind of come into it. You know, yes, you kind of have to do this probably in pre-con and identify it. And then once you take on the project, if that grading subcontractor that you've used for, 20 years isn't the guy and you got a new sub on there, that risk score might go up a little bit. Again, it's not bad. It's just we need to be mindful of it, not let our portfolio grow. And we also need to be pricing it. There's plenty of opportunities out there right now. And, now's the time that hopefully you can be pricing that risk accordingly or addressing it in the contract documents and things like that, because it goes beyond just the actual construction. It's, how are you accounting for these risks in the contract and what could leave you open to things. So, rather than just a concept, we thought we'd touch on a few what works. Focus on execution. Obviously, everybody wants to avoid the losing job, but it sometimes sneaks up on you. So if you have a problem on a job, identify it and address it. Hopefully, if you're implementing this model, you've at least put some more attention on those projects that maybe rate up a score of a 3, and things like that. Because we all know if you've ever had a losing job, it totally distracts you from everything else going on. Think about your own personal life. If you have a car crash on the way into work, it's going to distract you for the rest of the day. Control what you can control, how you treat customers, subs, employees, and control how you price things correctly. Again, that market line moves up and down. You have to price it the way you're going to price it, especially now with all the work that's out there. Now's the time to price it accordingly. And don't venture too far from the bullseye. If you do, price accordingly. Now, again, a lot of things going on, and we're sitting with a lot of customers going, we're pulling back in. We're coming closer to home because there's plenty of opportunities here. And B, our people want to be here and we need people. So the last thing you want to do is send somebody, that doesn't want to be in Lexington, Kentucky to run a job to Lexington. And all of a sudden they come home and go, yeah, I'm not going back because I'm going somewhere else. A few, some things to kind of be mindful of. The market price for risk will go down, especially if we have a downturn. But that doesn't mean it's the right price. So again, that goes back to pricing your risk. The market's not that smart. And we're already starting to see this a little bit on the sub basis. I was on a call yesterday with a commercial roofer, and they were mentioning one of their main competitors is going out. You might think, how are they going out now? There's plenty of work out there. This is typically where we start seeing more and more losses, is when things are good. From a subcontractor standpoint, a lot of them got large PPP money. And that money's now been distributed back out. So we have a balance sheet the same as it was 3 years ago, but with sometimes twice the work and also labor pressures and supply chain issues. So most of the time, a bad owner will equal a bad job. I told you our loss statistics, 60% of the time, it's one bad job and it happens to be one bad owner. And the odds don't change just because you need work. It's probably actually worse. If you have an owner that you're fighting with before you sign a contract, it's probably not going to be a very good marriage. There's a learning curve to every new market, geography type, and that must be priced in. And if you can't price it in, hopefully you can find the talent that's at least done something like that before. And again, be aware of the contractual risk. We're seeing that now. I think the construction industry is doing a good job of pushing back on some of this, but it's not. You still have owners that, they're getting long bid lists, even though there's plenty of opportunities, and they see construction still on sale, and let's go push it down and see who's going to take it. So.
And this is where, and we've got another program coming on this, but this is where we're talking, part of what we're talking about here is dealing with owners that recognize their supply chain issues. That's not necessarily, something that you should bear the entire risk of. There's availability issues. There's, lag time issues that would cause, additional general conditions. And if your owner doesn't recognize any of that, to Brian's point, I mean, that might not be a good owner for working in this environment.
Yeah, I think the bigger one is the delay. Most owners, they're buying gas, they're buying, groceries, and they see it. And they're like, fine, I'll pay you. But then when you go tell them it's going to be 6 months longer too, they're like, hold on a second, isn't that why I'm paying this premium? And, I think negotiating that and trying to get owners locked in as quickly as you can is probably a good idea right now. I really think now's the time to, if you don't have a go no go, put one in place. And I'm sure Sterling's more than happy to help you kind of with that. They've got a lot of customers that can go do it. We've got some resources I'm happy to share as well. And if you have one in place, revisit it and revisit what is in those procedures. Because again, you can do a lot on the front end of, much like you guys probably vet subcontractors, of vetting owners, vetting projects, things like that, to make sure that, or if you're a subcontractor, vetting the GC to make sure that you're getting on a project that, hopefully aligns right. Because, construction's a risky business. And, unfortunately, especially in the GC space, we haven't necessarily seen the market extremely increase their pricing for some of this. Now, I do think we've done a better job in contracting methods and CM at risk, and some progressive design build has hopefully taken some of that risk out of there. Still, we're an industry that typically, especially general contractors, is pricing large risk at less than or single digit numbers, and that's most industries wouldn't get out of bed to do that. So. And again, I know pretty simple concept, so there's not a lot of slides. Katie, I don't know if you have anything in the chat or anybody in the room has any questions or anything like that. So.
One of the things I wanted to mention is when we were in Florida, one of the things I thought was really interesting was Travelers put a WIP report for a client, and they literally said, "This is the last WIP report we got." They blew up after this.
Yeah, we went back and tracked the risk and the loss.
And they went through and risk rated all the jobs according to this model. And there was, they were way far from the bullseye on most of them, several of them.
Yeah.
And then they said, well, we were just curious. So we went back into the archive, and they said 2 years earlier, when there was no sign of trouble, we went through the same exercise and risk rated the portfolio, same kind of analysis. And it was totally different. Like, most of the jobs were right near the bullseye, barely over one. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of this illustration here. Yeah.
And this concept of this go no go, there may be some people on this call that don't have that. Some hard bid contractors, I think, don't always have that. I mean, it's essentially just a process that you would have internally with your pre-con, your senior management team, the folks who say, yeah, we're going to do that, we're going to chase this one or not, and being thoughtful about setting up some kind of grid, some kind of model similar to this, where you're identifying the key risk factors and you're applying some weights to them, and you're thinking through, how does it fit? Is it a good opportunity? And that's really where the contractors that came and gave their testimonial saw a lot of value on this. Was just, to Brian's point, this stuff creeps up on you if you're not being mindful about it on a job by job basis and having a refined process. And it doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, the better ones are simple.
I think most people do this informally, right? I mean, even your hard bid contractor, we sit with them all the time. And if we're going to bid the XYZ municipality, there's a XYZ municipality surcharge we're going to put on this.
Right.
It's the concept of formalizing it, and it doesn't have to be a fancy spreadsheet. This is a pretty easy thing, right? Take all your jobs and start marking them, and take the jobs you're bidding the next week and start marking them and trying to figure it out. Because again, it's not saying that you can't take that job that's a 3. It's okay, what do we do? How are we mitigating this on a job that's a 3 and doing that thing? But the act of putting it down is strong. It's similar things to hiring, right? We hear all the time, people, I've got a real great hiring procedure, and then they tell you they just hired a senior guy, and then he's gone the next meeting, and you're like, what happened? Well, if we just kind of hired him, he had a good resume. If we would have system, it probably would have kicked him out. Well, this is why you have processes and procedures in place, and now's the time to do it. Again, we've got so many new risks in the marketplace, and not be heading to some sort of recession or downturn. So now's the time to do it. Not when, all of a sudden you've got a wound that's bleeding. So.
Have any questions in the chat?
And this gets logged, right? Katie, you can share that this will be sent out to everybody. So yeah.
Again, I think this is a very simple concept, a very simple model, but I also think, it can be very impactful. And we've seen these, well thought out go, no go process being really helpful. And I think it's especially helpful as companies get bigger, because to Brian's point, I think the informality when you're smaller, that may be happening. One or two senior people who decide which jobs to chase may be doing a very fine job of that. But as the organization gets bigger and you have estimators and pre-con and you build out infrastructure, that's particularly where I think this is valuable as you grow the company.
And aside from, some of our material or supply chain issues, a lot of these news haven't changed. I mean, I remember when I got into business, I read, I think, a FMI article from 1987 that, why contract fell, and they tried to update it in like the early 2000s, and it really hasn't changed. I mean, things have stayed the same. So it's not like, oh my goodness, what, are there going to be a bunch of new things I got to start monitoring on my jobs? No, they're really similar and simple. And I think if you can just be pragmatic about, marking them down and having an analytical approach to it, hopefully avoid some disaster. Or if a job does start going a little south, you've at least priced that or have some contractual way to recoup some money.
Very good. A nice, brief, succinct program.
There you go. It's a simple concept, so I don't want to drag it on any longer than it needs to be. So,
thank you, Brian. We appreciate it. Please be on the lookout. Our next program has to do with cybersecurity. If you've renewed your insurance anytime in the last 12 months, you are familiar with that concept, and you've probably had a big increase in your cybersecurity premium. So we're excited to have this next program. It's called The Cost of Doing Business, on July 26th at 10 a.m. It will be webinar only. Michael Shrub, one of my colleagues here, is partnering with Avalon Cybersecurity and the law firm of Taylor English Dumas to present the program. You'll hear from industry insiders on how to strengthen your cybersecurity posture, limit potential liabilities, and reduce the cost. And that stuff has been going up literally in multiples of pricing. So not percentages, but like 1x, 2x, 3x kind of thing. We're also planning another program for those in the construction industry on August 10th. Good friends of ours, attorneys at Hudson, Lambert, Parrott, Walker, will cover contractual strategies for some of what we talked about today, for supply chain challenges and material escalations, things that you can put into your bid qualifications, but also in your contracts to have a fair balance of that risk between your company and the upstream party, whether that be the general contractor or the owner. So look out for that. We think that should be quite compelling information. These guys have quite a presence in the construction space around town. So thanks for joining us. Please reach out to Katie if you have ideas for a program. We are constantly looking for fresh ideas that people want to hear about, and would love to take those into account as we go forward. Thanks so much.